So we're interviewing Alan Marston, who is a candidate for City Council in Olathe. So, Alan, why don't we begin with an introduction of yourself and why you're running for City Council?
Sure. I'm a 49-year-old married guy, just a standard guy. Got two kids, one 21, one 16. I'm a former police officer. I'm a veteran, and I've been a retail security and safety professional for 25 years.
Wow.
The reason I started running was primarily because there's a lack of accountability in government. We've seen it at all levels. It's actually trickled down to our level here as well. There are some members of our city council that simply don't return emails, don't return phone calls. And when they do, they get rude with the people. If someone gets the courage to stand in front of city council to oppose a development or an ordinance, there are times where they are belittled. And that's something that I can't tolerate as a person, and I don't think the community should tolerate it from their elected officials. So that's one of the reasons that got me started. There are so many different reasons.
That's awesome. Um, so, by your city and your state being predominantly a red state, a deep red state, um,
Yes.
how would you identify yourself on the political spectrum? You know, progressive, liberal, moderate, conservative, a bag of all tricks.
Well, if you keep it with the color theme, I'm pretty much tie-dye. I go all over the board, man. Um, with my background being the way it is, obviously I'm going to have some conservative values in me. You know, strong on public safety, strong on the military. Luckily, City Council doesn't have a military, otherwise that could be rather fun. Um, I tend to be fiscally moderate. I don't want to raise taxes because I kind of like to keep money in my own pocket. But I also refuse to consider removing services that take care of the people. So that's why I categorize myself as a moderate. I'm not fiscally conservative, but I want to take care of the people. That's my main thing. But when it comes to social issues, civil rights issues, things dealing with the people themselves, I'm about as far left as you can go, probably. And that shows in some of my endorsements. Last week I got endorsed by Equality Kansas, which stands to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community. And I'm very proud of that endorsement.
Awesome. And so speaking of which, because I did my research on you prior to the interview. I familiarized myself with your campaign. The audience, of course, doesn't know. So you have a very forthcoming website with all of your information out there, which is phenomenal. So people can actually kind of get to know you before they meet you or anything else. So could you identify some key issues in Olathe and what your plans are or for proposals or whatnot to fix some of the issues that you guys might have?
Right. Well, like I said a few minutes ago, public safety is my biggest passion in life. It started early on when I joined the military. Then I was a police officer. So public service has always been a part of my core belief system, and this is the next phase of that. So with that, I want to make sure that our city is as protected as humanly possible. We have one of the best fire departments in the world. If you check all the rankings and everything, benchmark-wise, the insurance standard, it's all Class A, number one, across the board. We are literally one of the top 265 fire departments in the world, according to those measures. However, our city has very much exploded over the past 20 years in population, in economic growth, and that's great as long as the infrastructure keeps up with that growth. Mm-hmm. So with the direction that the city is growing to the south and to the west, we have not expanded our services into that area. So we are looking at an area that is essentially underprotected as far as fire services go. So I met with the fire chief, brilliant guy, love the guy, and I pointed on the map to one of the newer developed areas, and I said, so if I go over here, I'm kind of getting up there, you can see in the beard, it's gray, if I go over there and I have a heart attack, what's going to happen? He said, you're going to die, because we cannot get there fast enough. So 2 things came to mind right there. Number 1, don't go to that part of town for a little while. And number 2, we've got to get another fire station built to protect the families that live there, the school kids, the schools themselves, the millions of dollars in businesses out there. It's ridiculous that they're not covered. And then we've got one of the top police departments in the country, again, according to all the benchmark studies. And they are achieving these measures with 30 fewer officers than the average staffing model for our size city. What that does is that puts an undue burden on the officers that are there to carry this tremendous load. And the strain, the stress, and everything that naturally goes along with police work, you're amplifying that by not having enough coverage. So I would like to get them staffed up.
Right.
And then there's the other issue is the transparency issue. I don't see how you can serve the people without actually talking with them. So to that end, what I'm proposing that we do is I'm going to have monthly town hall meetings or coffee events or pizza parties or something where everybody can come in. I can explain to them what's going on in the city, how it's going to impact our ward and their lives, whether it be financial or it's an inconvenience traffic-wise for a little while. I'm also going to have a ward-specific website, possibly. Definitely going to have a Facebook page, and you've probably seen I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. So all of these things just help to connect the people to the government, and it's a basic process that people have forgotten about, and we need to bring that back into the forefront.
Awesome. Also, in your platform, you spoke to diversity. Specifically, I want to commend you for your reach to the LGBT community as being one of your main targets to address diversity. I started this show, Ergo, to increase engagement of minorities and millennials. So how much of an impact do millennials and minorities have in your city, and how do you plan to engage them?
Well, right now, both groups, the millennials and the minorities, are a little out of the process as far as it goes right now. They're getting much more active, very much more engaged. And most of that you could probably trace back to November of last year.
Right.
Everybody's on fire about it, and that's globally. The way to get them engaged and involved is simply to approach them, interact with them. We've got a Young Democrats group here in Johnson County where we live. It started 6 months ago, and it has just really, really grown to a very good-sized organization. And they're very active. They're out canvassing for candidates. They're registering people to vote. All the things that you would expect young political organization to do. And they're very supported by the party itself and by most of the candidates. We really enjoy having them out there helping us. So the more people we can get involved in that is going to help. There are also other political organizations that are very active as well. Reaching out to them is the key. If you don't engage them, it's not going to work. And then when you do engage them, when you sit down with them and find out what their issues and concerns are, don't say, okay, give me a couple weeks, I'll come up with the answer myself and give it to you.
Right.
Make them a part of that solution. Make them have their own input because they know what they want. And a lot of times, people my age don't. Right. Now, I used to be young. I try to think I'm young, but I'm not. And I'm not the one who's having to look at such a widespread job search that they are dealing with. So as a community, we need to make sure that we're addressing the job situations, housing, even things as basic as entertainment. We've got to have the right things in our city to keep the millennials here, keep the minorities here, make everybody feel welcomed, make them feel safe, and make them feel wanted.
Right.
They have to be a part of this community. Now, of course, I'm not talking handouts. They've got to work with us and make everything work for the entire city. There are key parts to citizenship that we may have to make sure that everybody takes part in. For example, voting. We've got to get that vote out. In my ward, 4 years ago, when this seat was available, 1,200 people voted. Now, you may not know much about Olathe, but I'll tell you this. We are a suburb of Kansas City.
Right.
We're on the Kansas side. And there, in my ward, the southeast corner of this city, has 19,000 registered voters. And only 1,200 voted in the last election.
Wow.
That's
is draconian almost.
Very much.
So you are endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, and you were, as you said, a police officer and in the military security as well. Nationally, as you know, tensions among communities and policemen are growing to be more tense, obviously. Do you have that same problem in Olathe? And if not, what would you say to the communities that do have these tensions?
Up to this point in Olathe, we have not had any situations like what you're discussing. I'll say this, though. Kansas City, it's a 15-20 minute drive for me to get to downtown Kansas City.
Okay.
Kansas City, Missouri has actually recently been mentioned by the FBI as one of the highest murder rates in the country right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. We had, I believe, our 70th homicide just last week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like us. We're that bedroom community. We're nice, quiet, peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
But we do traffic with KC quite a bit. So there is that intermingling of elements. Any of that tension, that's up in Kansas City. We don't have it here, luckily. Am I going to say it will never happen here? No. I'm not that stupid. The key to addressing all of this, and it's the same sort of mantra you're hearing on the national news, is education on everybody's part. Our police department, I mentioned, I think very highly of them. They do spend a lot of time in training on de-escalation of force, trying to make sure that that tension level doesn't get to the point where that trigger finger just goes. Making sure that the people are educated on the functions of the police department, the best way to handle situations when dealing with the police. It's not just on the police, it's also on us into how we respond to their issues, their commands, their traffic stops. So we have a Citizens Oversight Board. We have Civilian Police Academy.
Okay.
They are very active in our community. They do events constantly, Coffee with a Cop. They do donuts all the time because, donuts at cops, it works.
Right.
It's not just a fable, it's true, trust me. But they engage with the community. They work with the school kids. A very proactive school resource officer program helps a lot. It helps develop kids at an earlier age to know that cops aren't the bad guys all the time.
Right.
There are a couple of bad seeds, no question about it. But in Olathe, luckily, we've been very, very lucky to have a strong, positive image of police officers.
That is phenomenal. And I think that everybody could definitely learn from that. I mean, this is honestly the first I've ever heard of anybody having a citizens oversight board. I just think that that's I hate to call that progressive in such a deep red state, but I consider that to be very progressive. Or maybe just the bigger cities are just behind the ball on that. I'll say that. So that way I'm being fair to both sides.
Right. Though they are becoming much more common.
Okay.
It's the way most larger cities are starting to address the concerns of the people, because they need to have an input. They need to be relating directly with the police so that the police know where the fear is and how to fix that.
That is really good stuff. So we spoke to transparency and making sure that we hold the elected officials accountable. Mm-hmm. So in our national government and even in some local governments, the elected officials are becoming more so politicians, more concerned with political victories and special interests and, all that jazz. Are there any other reforms that you think we might need for government overall, nationally, locally, either or?
Well, nationally, to speak to the transparency and accountability thing, one of the things about being in this deep red state that I'm in is we have officials that have made national news fairly recently. We have a representative for my district, in fact, Kevin Yoder. Mm-hmm. He is one of those that will not have a town hall meeting. Right. Instead, he has what he calls tele-town halls. It's basically a big conference call. Mm-hmm. And if you're not selected to be on that call, you're not getting on that call. And if you start to ask a question that's not approved or it starts to turn sideways for him, you get disconnected or muted.
Right. Wow.
So he's orchestrating his communications with the citizens, and it's not a good thing. The two senators we have, Pat Roberts, who has pretty much checked out, and then he doesn't talk to us.
Right.
He does. Jerry Moran, I'll give him credit. During this whole healthcare fiasco, he actually came back during the recesses, and he actually held town hall meetings, and he would stand there for an hour and a half, talk with the citizens, listen to their questions. Now, granted, being in Kansas, we tend to be a little bit more polite. We're not going to stand there and just chuck tomatoes at the guy. He will engage in the conversation. And it's a fairly respectful conversation. Every once in a while you'll hear a boo or a hiss or a cheer or whatever the case may be. But he listened to us. And when it started to come to the big push, he was one of the last two senators who said, no, they're not going to vote on the motion to proceed. So he helped kill that health care bill. Right. So we praised him. We gave him all the high fives and kudos in the world. And then 2 days later, he says he's in favor of the straight out repeal. So we turned the table again. So we're trying our best to hold him accountable. So yeah, that does trickle down into the local as well. But as far as a local reform I would like to see take place is our city has a policy, and has had for many years, to pay all employees of the city at the median level for our size city. Mm-hmm. I get it. As a businessman, I understand payroll is your single most controllable expense. But when you have departments, our Public Works Department achieved accreditation for the fourth straight time.
Right.
They have set the standard in many of the measurables as model ratings. Our police department and fire departments, I can't ever talk enough about these guys. I love them to death. But they're being paid at a median level with less equipment, fewer officers, and they're still achieving these measurables. In my opinion, for that, you need to be paid commensurate to your performance. You don't get those ratings and still maintain that median pay. You've got to escalate that pay a little bit. They've got to be rewarded. Otherwise, you're going to lose these performers. You're going to lose the trained people that we have. So you're going to have to start fresh. And then your measurables are going to drop. And you get it back up there, and then they realize, you know what? I can go 2 cities over, and I can receive double the pay.
Right.
Doesn't make sense to me. You get what you pay for.
Exactly.
So I want to retain those people. I want to make sure that those people are taken care of financially, benefit-wise, and equipment-wise, to make sure that they do the job they need to do for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go home to their families and enjoy a quality of life.
Right.
That's common sense.
Right. It's kind of like another metaphor, or I don't even know the proper soliloquy or whatever, or life lesson. One of my old bosses taught me was, give me the tools, I'll build you a house. So if you don't give me the proper tools, then I can't build you the correct house, or I'll build you a faulty one. So to speak.
And I'm not talking about, overdoing it and just gifting them this stuff. They earn it. Right. If they didn't earn it, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want to escalate the pay for them, but they earn it every single day. And they've asked for this. They've tried to reach out to the government officials and say, "Hey, we need this money, guys. We're putting up good numbers for you." Mm-hmm. And the response they're getting is, if we escalate your pay scale, then we need to escalate the pay scale for the accountant in accounts receivable, or the trash collector, or the maintenance worker in Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm. That's not even apples to apples, I'm sorry.
No, that's very much apples to oranges.
Yeah, you're talking apples to carrots. It's not even the same spectrum.
Exactly. Well, one is responsible for life-saving measures, and we could go all day on the debate of pay scales, because I'm actually one of those far-left people who is not on board with the $15 minimum wage pay increase. So I identify with you as well on some conservative values. So, all right, well, why don't you go ahead and provide the audience with some campaign information, election dates, and how we all can support you in your upcoming election and primary?
Sure. We have a primary on August the 1st. There are 4 candidates running. It's a nonpartisan election, which is good, because really the things that divide us as Democrats and Republicans are more of a state and federal level issue. That stuff doesn't happen at the city level. It's all about the services you provide. So there are 4 of us. The top 2 vote getters move on to the general election November the 7th, so we're making the final push right now. All my information is available online. Like you said, I'm pretty out there as far as letting everybody know what I'm about on my website, which is marstonforolathe.org, and it's the word for, not the number 4. It's FOR. So MARSTONFOROLATHE.org. I'm also the only candidate in this race that has 4 endorsements. As you mentioned, the Fraternal Order of Police. I mentioned Equality Kansas. I've also received the endorsement of Mainstream Coalition, and just the other day I received the endorsement of the International Association of Firefighters. So firefighters and police can be brought together to unify behind something, and they've chosen me, luckily. We're still out there in the heat of all of this, except for today, knocking on doors and actually reaching to the people. I want to talk to everybody, find out what their concerns are and what they need from their government. It's kind of old school to do it that way, but I believe that's the truest way to campaign. A campaign is like a job interview. If you don't talk to the boss, how do you expect to get the job?
Exactly.
So I'm talking to the boss every day I get a chance to. It's very exciting. We're having a lot of fun. I think my wife is going to be in the corner hyperventilating on election night. I'll be pacing in circles, but I feel very good about our chances in this primary. So if anybody wants to hop on board and help, even from Ohio or Massachusetts or wherever, we can set you up to make phone calls. I've also got donation links on my website. No politician on the face of the earth is ever going to turn away money. So
exactly.
I will always take a donation.
All right. Well, Alan, thank you so much for your time and being on the show. We'll check back in with you just to see the results of the primary, and then, continuing to help you promote your campaign for whatnot, because I anticipate you'll make the primaries, and hopefully we can help give you a little push to the actual election.